his shorts and pants and stood there naked, looking at the dazzling beach and the water. He was old enough, 12 years and a few months, to have lost the prominent tummy of childhood, and not yet old enough for adolescence to have made him awkward. You could see now that he might make a boxer, as far as width and heaviness of shoulders went, but there was a mildness about his mouth and eyes that proclaimed no devil. He patted the palm trunk softly, and forced at last to believe in the reality of the island, laughed delightedly again, and stood on his head. He turned neatly onto his feet, jumped down to the beach, knelt and swept a double armful of sand into a pile against his chest. Then he sat back and looked at the water with bright, excited eyes. Ralph, the fat boy, lowered himself over the terrace and sat down carefully, using the edge as a seat. "I'm sorry I've been such a time. Them fruit." He wiped his glasses and adjusted them on his button nose. The frame had made a deep pink V on the bridge. He looked critically at Ralph's golden body and then down at his own clothes. He laid a hand on the end of a zipper that extended down his chest. "My auntie." Then he opened the zipper with decision and pulled the whole windbreaker over his head. "There." Ralph looked at him sidelong and said nothing. "I expect we'll want to know all their names," said the fat boy, "and make a list. We ought to have a meeting." Ralph did not take the hint, so the fat boy was forced to continue. "I don't care what they call me," he said confidently, "so long as they don't call me what they used to call me at school." Ralph was faintly interested. "What was that?" The fat boy glanced over his shoulder, then leaned toward Ralph. He whispered, "They used to call me Piggy." Ralph shrieked with laughter. He jumped up. "Piggy, Piggy." "Ralph, please." Piggy clasped his hands in apprehension. "I said I didn't want Piggy, Piggy." Ralph danced out into the hot air of the beach, and then returned as a fighter plane with wings swept back and machine-gunned Piggy. "She-aw." He dived in the sand at Piggy's feet and lay there laughing. "Piggy." Piggy grinned reluctantly, pleased despite himself at even this much recognition. "So long as you don't tell the others." Ralph giggled into the sand. The expression of pain and concentration returned to Piggy's face. "Half a sec." He hastened back into the forest. Ralph stood up and trotted along to the right. Here the beach was interrupted abruptly by the square motif of the landscape. A great platform of pink granite thrust up uncompromisingly through forest and terrace and sand and lagoon to inspected the whole 30 yards carefully and then plunged in. The water was warmer than his blood, and he might have been swimming in a huge bath. Piggy appeared again, sat on the rocky ledge, and watched Ralph's green and white body enviously. You can't half swim, Piggy. Piggy took off his shoes and socks, ranged them carefully on the ledge, and tested the water with one toe. It's hot. What did you expect? I didn't expect nothing. My auntie. Sucks to your auntie. Ralph did a surface dive and swam underwater with his eyes open. The sandy edge of the pool loomed up like a hillside. He turned over, holding his nose, and a golden light danced and shattered over his face. Piggy was looking determined and began to take off his shorts. Presently he was palely and fatly naked. He tiptoed down the sandy side of the pool and sat there up to his neck in his water, swaying proudly at Ralph. Aren't you gonna swim? Piggy shook his head. I can't swim. I wasn't allowed. My asthma. Sucks to your asthma. Piggy bore this with a sort of humble patience. You can't half swim well. Ralph paddled backwards down the slope, immersed his mouth, and blew a jet of water into the air. Then he lifted his chin and spoke. I could swim when I was 5. My daddy taught me. He's a commander in the Navy. When he gets leave, he'll come and rescue us. What's your father? Piggy flushed suddenly. My dad's dead, he said quickly, and my mom. He took off his glasses and looked vainly for something with which to clean them. I used to live with my auntie. She kept a candy store. I used to get ever so many candies, as many as I liked. When will your dad rescue us? Soon as he can.